Hey, Blake T. Wild here, and welcome back to The Ultimate Era. And welcome to Ultimate Doomsday, the first part of a 3-week-long coverage of Ultimate Doomsday. That's what the event's called. Ultimatum has happened. The world of the Ultimate Marvel Universe was irrevocably changed forever. And now, we witness the fallout of that. So if you haven't seen my video on Ultimatum, make sure to check it out. It's quite long and strenuous. But don't worry, because this book is actually written by someone who knows how to tell a story. Released in 2010, written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Rafa Sandoval, this is Ultimate Enemy. And before we get started, of course, this episode is brought to you by my Patreon and Etsy and my other stuff. Patreon.com/Smokey's videos gives you access to videos early when available. My comics are posted on there as well, Custodians and Destructo Boy, as well as movie commentaries and more. My Etsy shop has all the physical copies of my comics available for purchase. The book begins a handful of months after the ultimatum wave struck New York and all that chaos and destruction which reigned. The world is now starting to rebuild from the catastrophic attack on all life by Magneto, and Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman, aka the clone of Peter Parker, swings through Jersey City and lands on a skyscraper where she just kind of daydreams, staring over at the Roxxon company building. Then a massive amoeba thing erupts out of the entire complex, blasting out in all directions. Jessica swings into action and lands in a lab and asks what these idiots have done now. She works on saving the lab techs, who exclaim that they didn't do anything involving the big blob. Jessica gets who she can to a nearby roof, then heads back into the Roxxon building, and she's able to save a few more people when the whole thing begins collapsing and the building explodes. Cut to the Richards household in the suburbs somewhere in New York. If you have forgotten, Ultimatum technically ends, because it did happen in a tie-in, with Reed and the Fantastic Four disbanding. Reed and Sue break up, Ben joins S.H.I.E.L.D., Johnny goes on a soul search across the world, and Reed returns to live with his parents and younger siblings. I can't remember how many he has. I guess it's somewhere in western New York, it seems. It seems pretty far from New York City, but still in the state. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because it blows up. And in New York City, Sue Storm walks alone through the streets, totally invisible, enjoying the peace of unexistence that it gives her after everything that has happened to her. She heads into the newly refurbished Baxter building, past security, and upstairs into the main lab, where she finds Benjamin Grimm, the Thing. Since the events of Ultimatum and the fracturing of the Four, is that a title of a Fantastic Four comic book yet? If not, I claim it. Ben left both the Baxter Foundation and the Fantastic Four, and has begun working for S.H.I.E.L.D. as kind of like a test pilot and whatever they need, really, I guess. Sue excitedly calls out, and he smiles and welcomes her as she runs and leaps into his arms. She tells him that he looks so different now that he's a captain in a proper uniform, and she asks what he's doing here. And Ben tells her that he has had the week off and says he was just wondering about who he missed the most in the world. And it dawned on him that it's Sue. She laughs and gives him another hug. Then Sue begins giving Ben a tour of the new and improved facility, and they take a couple steps and Sue concludes the tour. Ben asks where everyone else is, the whole think tank part of the Baxter building, and Sue reveals that there is no one else. The government has not reinvested back into opening the program. Johnny lives in Queens and is finishing high school. Ben is in the military, and Dr. Storm is gone, leaving Sue all to her lonesome in the Baxter building. Ben asks if she's heard anything from Reed, and she tells him that they spoke a little bit, but it was the textbook definition of a bad breakup, made worse by the fact that neither of them had ever been in a real relationship prior to meeting each other, so they made every bad mistake possible. Sue tells Ben that she's looking forward to the future where it's just in the past, and she can say things like, "Oh, it's so funny that it was such a big deal back then, because now I can't even remember the guy's name." And Ben asks what she does all day. She explains that she's been analyzing endless data since Magneto, and on top of that, she's just kind of working on the same projects that she did before they became superheroes. Ben asks if she gets lonely, and Sue jokes that she has Dave, and the other Dave, the two heads of security. Ben tells her that military guards aren't company. And she tells him that she still does see Johnny every now and then, usually when he heads into the city with his friends. And Ben tells her that for the first time since the accident years ago, he finally feels good. He has a good setup now thanks to S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Air Force. He's finally feeling comfortable in his own rocky skin, but he found himself asking, does he really miss the old days of the Fantastic Four. She then asks how his rocks are and if they're still falling off, and starts inspecting his arm to try and move the conversation away from anything touchy. Ben assures her that he's been fine and that he really wants to tell her something, that he misses her. He truly misses her. He misses seeing her, having her brighten up his day, and the more and more he thought about it since the Fantastic Four disbanded, the more Ben has realized that he loves her.
Can't take that back now. Well, I mean, I know it was a kind of a long shot, but it's how I feel, Susie, and I never said nothing if you and Reed was together, but you ain't, it's just us now, and I'll get going. I'll lead. I'll get going. Something to remember me by. You take care, Susie.
Ben then heads out of the lab, and the automatic door slides shut, and Sue stands in silence and walks over to the rock plate, inspects it, and finds that it's smoldering. Then a massive tentacle smashes through the window and into the lab. Ben tries to run back inside, but the massive creature assaulting the Baxter building sprawls out and rockets him several blocks away. Elsewhere in New York, an old mustachioed white man sits in an outdoor restaurant and orders more wine. Then his watch begins going off, showing strange signals, and he looks up and a hulking form hovers down the street towards him, and the outdoor area blows up as the old man launches himself out of the blast and rips off his face to reveal Nick Fury. Fury asks why he can't just have a fucking meal in peace for once as the figure moves towards him, generating massive balls of energy. Then it detonates the entire building. Elsewhere, over New York City, Johnny Storm and Peter Parker trail through the sky as Johnny tries to convince Peter to at least try to get some royalties and produce Spider-Man action figures like the Fantastic Four did. Spidey tells him that it kind of takes away from the whole selfless act of heroism thing, and Kingpin owns his likeness rights, so Fisk would be making way more than Peter ever would. Then a huge multi-block explosion erupts, and at the restaurant, Nick Fury's personal protection field protects his personals. He has skipped across the pavement, whips out his handgun, and opens fire on his assailant. The figure generates another mass of energy and launches it at Fury, detonating against his shielding and tossing him down the street and into a clothing store. Fury groans and tells the customers that they need to run. Then he readies himself when a massive gust of fire rips through the street and onto the assailant, and what the fuck is that, Kilowog? Human Torch captures the villain in a ring of fire, and the flames get higher, but the attacker burns it away and launches more bursts of energy at Spidey and Matchhead. Nick Fury limps out into the street as the two teenage titans fight the mysterious monster, which then disappears. And Spider-Man is shocked that Nick Fury is back, because the last time Peter saw Nick Fury, he was getting arrested by the Squadron from another universe. Fury tells him he's been back for a little while now, since the whole ultimatum thing, and Spidey asks his absentee father figure what just happened. Fury tells the two that this must have been some kind of attempted assassination and asks what Peter's Spidey sense is telling him. But then Johnny interrupts because he hears something. He flies up above the buildings and sees the massive writhing biomass creature constricting itself in and around the Baxter building, and he soars off to help his sister. Meanwhile, Ben takes a running start and leaps off of a nearby rooftop and launches himself atop one of the biomass's tendrils. He holds on like a bucking bronco and begins carefully crawling his way into the building when the Human Torch arrives. Ben shouts to Johnny that Sue is still inside, and he blazes through an opening and finds the biomass nearly encapsulating Sue as she desperately holds herself in a force field. As Ben bashes the creature as hard as he can, and the area around him begins crumbling into a smoldering husk. Ben is shocked, unsure if it was the monster or him, and he's rocketed off and hits the pavement. He looks up and sees Johnny and Sue hovering down to him. Johnny asks Sue what this thing is, and Sue tells him that it obviously didn't come from the Baxter building and that she needs to get a sample of it. Johnny wonders who's trying to kill her, but Sue points out that she doesn't think she was the target. The Baxter building as a whole was. And she tells him that she doesn't know what it is or where it came from, but Reed will be able to figure it out. And that evening, as the sun sets, Jessica Drew returns to her apartment, flicks on the TV, and watches the news report on the Baxter building. Then her spider sense goes off, and a shadow moves from beneath her door. And Jessica leaps to the ceiling as Killer Wog blasts into her apartment. She webs the monster's face and leaps out of the window, narrowly avoiding a blast. And she swings away as the creature vanishes into a bright light. Later that night, Johnny, Ben, and Sue finally arrive at the former Richards home. And with the police still working to secure the area, inspecting the scene, an officer stationed nearby tells the heroes that there were no survivors, and they're still trying to clean up the aftermath. Then Spider-Man catches up and asks where they are. Johnny explains that it was Reed's parents' house, and Spidey learns that no one knew that the Richard family lived here because the government put them in some kind of witness protection program and moved them out here several years ago. Spidey thinks for a moment, recalling that Fury said he was also underground, yet the monster found him, and then asks if anybody has a cell phone. And in Forest Hills, Queens, Gwen Stacy and Bobby Drake do their homework and argue because Bobby is copying Gwen as May does the dishes. And then the house phone rings and May picks up to a panicked Peter Parker. And the creature teleports into their yard. Meanwhile, the Triskelion Director Danvers issues a code white high alert after everything that went down in one day, all within 20 minutes of each other. She asks if the president is safe, learns that he is, and wishes that they weren't just sitting ducks here in the Triskelion. Danvers then wonders why the hell 7 Roxxon labs were attacked across America, along with the Richards family, Fury, the Baxter building, Soho, and not, S.H.I.E.L.D., the Triskelion, anywhere the Ultimates are housed and based. Then she demands to know where the hell Tony is, along with the new Ultimates. She's informed that they're currently on a mission off-world and have lost contact, and Carol groans and asks if they've figured out what the fuck the Blob is, at least. They have. It's some kind of weird organism of an unknown class or species, and they believe that it might be interdimensional. They continue that S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are currently evacuating the areas in case that it is toxic, and Carol orders immediate details when the experts figure it out. And then an agent points out that the biggest problem that they're currently having is that most of the experts that they would normally get for something like this worked for Roxxon. Specifically, they worked at those 7 Roxxon sites that were destroyed. Danvers then updates all stations and outposts that they are on full lockdown and alert until further notice because this is now a war, and she wants every agent, from assassins to dishwashers, to get on this immediately. She orders a list of possible secondary targets and a defensive strategy organized. Then she heads to the bathroom, splashes some cold water in her face, and a figure holds a handgun to the back of her head. And she tells the man that he's in the ladies' room and asks how the hell Nick Fury broke in here. Fury tells her that he's the man and he can do whatever he needs to. He asks if she happens to know anything about what tried to kill him a couple hours ago, because it must have been sent by someone with access to a lot of intel. Carol spins around and kicks the gun out of his hand, and they fight through the bathroom, and Fury says that this definitely doesn't help his suspicions that Carol is trying to kill him. Meanwhile, a verbal fight at the Parker residence continues as May speaks to Peter over the phone. She can't understand him because Gwen and Bobby continue arguing, and then Gwen stops and freezes like the scene with the Jell-O in Jurassic Park, and Bobby spins around to see the monster outside. He forms an ice spear and launches it past May's head and into the creature, which rockets it into the street where it explodes. Bobby then freezes the entire house and creates an ice barrier as he tells Gwen and May to get out of here. The S.H.I.E.L.D. agent races into the bathroom and finds Danvers and Fury holding guns to each other and tells them that there's been an attack in Queens. They both realize that it's the Parker house and order a battalion of Hulkbusters on the ground immediately. Back in Forest Hills, Bobby fights the monster as it blasts him with its energy. He manages to freeze the thing completely solid and walks up wondering what the hell it even is. Then the monster smashes out of its ice hold and slams him into the street and prepares to detonate his head when the thing drops from the sky and clobbers it. The monster unleashes a massive burst of energy that sends Ben roaring down the street as the others continue to fight, and an ethereal glow begins cracking through Ben's rocks, and he feels that he's lost his breath, his chest totally empty, his head filled with air. Spidey helps Bobby to his feet, and Johnny and Sue face off against the creature. Sue demands to know who it is, what it is, and what it wants. and captures it into a bubble and repeatedly smashes it into the road. Then the S.H.I.E.L.D. Hulkbuster Battalion arrive, led by Danvers, as S.H.I.E.L.D. begins evacuating the neighborhood. They quickly surround the monster, and it erupts out of her force field, but Sue quickly forms a new one around its explosion. Then Spidey notices Ben, glowing like a star and crying out in pain. And he looks at them in fear, glowing brightly, and erupts in a blast of purple energy that washes through the area. Ben then falls lifelessly to the ground as more and more blinding white-purple energy crackles through his form, and he blacks out. The next morning, the creature assassin has been captured and detained by S.H.I.E.L.D. and held in a stasis cell at a secret location. Danvers demands to know what the fuck this thing is and what it's trying to accomplish, but it just kind of hovers there in silence. So Nick Fury rocks up with an adamantium baseball bat and starts slamming it into its head and demands some answers. Fury conducts his extensive interrogation techniques when Hawkeye stops him and tells Fury that he has some pent-up stuff that he wants to get out too, and invites Fury to take a break. As Fury leaves, Hawkeye decides to start with the creature's reproductive organs. And back in Queens, the police cordon off the street as damage control pulls up. Inside the Parker residence, the found family that is all sit around the kitchen table, totally exhausted. May informs the kids that they do not need to go to school today, but they do need to get some sleep. Peter sits there in a thoughtful silence as the others discuss what the hell happened last night. And May asks Peter what he's doing. Peter mumbles that thing knew who he is and where he lives. Bobby asks how he can be sure that it didn't come here for him, and Peter just looks at him. Because you don't have your own series, Iceman. There's a reason there isn't an Ultimate Iceman comic book. May assures Peter that it wasn't his fault, and for once, Peter agrees. Then he brings up the fact that Reed Richards died, his whole family died, and they were out in the suburbs under a fake name. Not to mention Nick Fury was targeted, and the only people that knew that he was back were the Ultimates and S.H.I.E.L.D. Peter tells him that whoever did this is probably going to keep coming. Then he masks up and heads out. May runs after him and grabs her nephew, demanding that he stay. They hug, and Peter suggests that everyone heads out of the city for now, and then he swings away to New York. Sometime later, Hawkeye finally gets some answers. Told to him through bloodied coughs of the creature, it tells him that it is the creation of the Creator, and that it was sent into this sickening society where morals have been corrupted to bring punishment. And out of the impending destruction, a new, clean world will be made. Then the creature explodes into the biomass, and Hawkeye narrowly escapes as Danvers orders an evacuation. S.H.I.E.L.D. narrowly escape their black site as the massive thing erupts out of the building and burns into a smoldering green husk. Elsewhere, at the Triskelion, Ben Grimm lies in a chamber and is monitored by Sue. Johnny assures her that Ben is going to be fine, as Sue cries and prays for Ben to make it, pleading with him to wake up because she can't lose him too. She leans against the chamber as Johnny leaves and speaks to the unconscious Ben, telling him that he wasn't supposed to fall apart like this. Especially not when he told her that he loves her. She apologizes for the way she acted at the lab, telling him that she was just shocked and needed time to process what he said, and that she wanted to tell him that he deserves someone better than her. But she just couldn't bring herself to speak. She just froze. Then Ben's entire body recoils and begins spasming as the heart monitor goes into overdrive. Sue calls the doctors into the room as Ben's eyes shoot open and he begins glowing. He writhes around and shakes the entire floor. Sue forms a force field and cries out to Ben, calling for anyone to help. Johnny races inside as the blackened rocks shatter outward and the glowing form of Benjamin Grimm sits in the ruined chamber. The end. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. This is, I think, quite the beginning to the ultimate Doomsday 3-part story. It's got intrigue, it's got crazy action, it's got character moments. That's a big thing for me. I don't want just nonstop action. I want to feel like these are actual living, breathing people, and this has that. I love the evolution that these characters are taking. I love that Jessica Drew is a part of this. She's an awesome character in the Ultimate Universe who really should have gotten her own series. You're bringing back every other Spider-Person Marvel. Bring Ultimate Jessica Drew back. Give her something to do in the mainstream universe. Why not? Ultimate Enemy is such a unique and interesting hard right turn for the Ultimate Marvel Universe. And yes, we do know what happens, but where's the fun in that? When revisiting something like this, like Star Wars, like Marvel movies, any story where you know the outcome, how can you not revisit it with that suspension of disbelief, like it is your first time watching it, first time reading it, anything. You look at it with a new lens, like it's the very first time you've experienced it. Sure, you'll probably catch things here and there that you didn't notice, or some things that line up, but why wouldn't you try to revisit something like it's the very first time? It just makes the experience so much better, so much more lifeful. I love doing that with anything I read or watch. It just makes it so great because you truly get to enjoy the story in a whole new way, in a way that you can take your time and witness the journey that these characters are making. And yeah, that's right. Ultimate Ben Grimm has been inside of a rocky cocoon for the past several years. That's his deal. My main issue with this book, this part 1 of Ultimate Doomsday, the first chapter, is that there isn't enough Jessica Drew. Come on! Although she does show up quite a bit in the next 2 ones, but Ultimate Enemy is a well-told, quick-paced, action-packed story that doesn't let the action of the big fight scenes take over the emotional aspects and the ethos of the characters. Mark Miller. My favorite part of Ultimate Enemy is Ben and Sue together in the Baxter building. Their reunion after not seeing each other for several months, after just that time, going through so many changes, growing so much as people, especially after what they've experienced, after what they've done, not just as the Fantastic Four, but with Ultimatum. It's such a beautiful, kind, and happy moment in a time after their lives have just utterly fallen apart and are now being rebuilt. And I don't know what the majority opinion is post-Ultimatum, because I'm pretty sure Ultimatum just soiled the Ultimate Universe for everyone. Nobody really read it. There's not a lot of discussion on the stuff that comes after it, which I believe is the best parts of the Ultimate Universe. Post-Ultimatum era, I love, because this is when the Ultimate Universe really starts going into fantastical new ideas. Near the end of the first bit before Ultimatum, 2008, 2009, whenever, a lot of the major books and like even the little event books and stuff, they're kind of just treading water, thinking about how can we do this classic Marvel story, this classic Marvel character, but in the Ultimate Universe, and it usually didn't work. But after Ultimatum, it goes in such a crazy, fantastic direction. And it kind of becomes what the MCU is at the time of recording, which is a still realistic world, somewhat grounded within the reality, with a healthy mix of fantastical elements of a comic book reality. It changes so much, because it's not just, oh, well, this is the Avengers, but in real life, and they're super militaristic, this and that, blah, blah, blah. There's still elements of that, yes, but at the same time, this world is growing, things are changing, new technologies are being discovered and created, and it just becomes so much better. I highly recommend going through and reading these post-Ultimatum books, because Jonathan Hickman comes in. Mark Miller actually comes back and does good stuff that isn't just overtly edgy. There's interesting stories. There's so many great storytellers. Ultimate FF is like one of my favorite post-Ultimatum books. You get more Ultimate Spider-Man with Bendis. You get Miles Morales. You get new Ultimates. You get the young Ultimates. So much stuff was missed out because Jeff Loeb ruined everybody's taste for the Ultimate Universe. Even though that's the equivalent of like the urban legend that, you know, Romans would go and have this big feast and then they'd vomit out everything to go back then and have more food. That's the point that we're at. Ultimatum was the vomit. Post-Ultimatum is the banquet once more. But those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on my thoughts, and I will see you next time. Bye.